All right, everybody, we are ready to go. It's 12:02, so I'll call the meeting to order. I want to start by saying that this is a virtual meeting during the COVID-19 emergency, and meetings can be viewed via live streaming on YouTube and the city website. Please check the city website at london.ca for current details of COVID-19 service impacts. I will also say that the city is committed to making every effort to provide alternate formats and communication supports for council, standing, or advisory committee meetings and information upon request. To make a request for any city service, please contact accessibility@london.ca or 519-661-2489, extension 2425. To make a request specific to this meeting, please contact csc@london.ca. I'm also going to start by saying today is National Day of Indigenous Peoples. I'm wearing an orange shirt, although it might not look orange on the screen, and others are wearing orange shirts in commemoration of the Indigenous peoples and Indigenous solidarity. And also mine in particular says every child matters, in recognition of the horrific toll that was taken through the policies surrounding the residential school system, and in particular the discovery of over 300 graves of children that had died in the residential school system. And I expect that there will be more discoveries to come. So, sorry. We'll also start this meeting by saying that we've made some progress locally here. London City Council has in building and fostering a relationship with urban Indigenous people, as well as First Nations neighbors that we are close to here in London. We have a long way to go. One great milestone was the hiring of a person to fill the role, the new role of Indigenous Community Liaison and Advisor, and I'm hopeful that having that position filled will get us back on track and seeing more progress in this relationship. We also have hired a director of anti-racism and anti-oppression, which I hope will also help us to see more progress being made. We don't normally do this. It is something that we are working towards, a formal recognition of the land that we hold our meetings on. So today I will say that an acknowledgement, a land acknowledgement, is given to show respect, reciprocity, and allyship to the Indigenous peoples whose land we share. And it's my honor to acknowledge the history of the Indigenous territory on which this event takes place. The City of London is neighbor to 3 First Nations communities, the Chippewas of the Thames First Nation, Munsee Delaware Nation, and Oneida Nation of the Thames. The 3 long-standing Indigenous groups of the region are the Anishinaabeg, the Haudenosaunee, and the Lenni Lenape peoples. There are many treaty relationships between Canada and Indigenous nations, including the earliest of these, the Two Row Wampum and the Nan Fam Treaty of 1701, which established the beaver hunting grounds of the Haudenosaunee people. We stand now on the treaty territory of the Anishinaabeg, defined within the Pre-Confederation Treaty of 1796, known as the London Township Treaty. All peoples have a role to play in honoring these treaties and contributing to reconciliation. Miigwech, Wanishi, Yawungo. And I will also say that that acknowledgement I wrote with help and contribution from the Council of the Chippewas of the Thames First Nation, as well as the former chief of the Oneida Nation of the Thames and the former chief of the Munsee Delaware Nation. So with all of that underway and behind us, I will go to our consent items. There are 3 of them. Sorry, first I'll go to disclosures and see if there are any disclosures of pecuniary interest from committee members. Seeing none, now I'll go to consent. And there are 3, wondering if anybody would like to pull. Councillor Pelosa.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd like 2.1 called separate.
Thank you. Anyone else? Councillor Kayabag, I see your hand up. Go ahead.
Madam Chair, I wanted to pull 2.1 as I have a motion to entertain, but I think Councillor was already listed.
Okay. And Councillor Van Holst, you had your hand up too?
Madam Chair, I'd pull 2.3, but I guess we will deal with that separately anyway.
So we'll deal with all the consent items on their own, one at a time. I'll go to 2.1 first, and Councillor Pelosi, you put your hand up, and then I'll go to Councillor Kayabag, who has indicated that she has a motion she would like to put on the floor.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. I don't know if it was circulated beforehand, the motion that's going to be before us, but was just looking forward to conversation in regards to 2.1, as I did raise concerns as this came forward. Initially as a pilot, that we didn't have key performance indicators built in. As council going into this, we didn't set out what success in this program looks like. I see we've had 25 applications, but is that what we had hoped for, as we didn't actually outline it? Having read the report of the concerns from the community and the most frequently asked questions, you know, do they get to meet with the mayor? Do they come before council? Is there a ceremony for them? And having reviewed this morning the application that's available online, was just looking for staff direction of ways to make the application more clear, that and just reiterating that when proclamations are issued, that the city isn't advertising this for you. They're not leveraging your event and doing social media things for the organizations who do great work in London. Just looking for staff's feedback on how to better do the application if we're going to continue with this program.
Okay, I'll go to you, Madam Clerk. Oh, sorry, I have Ms. Westlake Powers on the line who's going to comment.
Thank you. Through the chair, we haven't had any feedback specific to the application form. As the applications come in, there's certainly two-way communication about expectations and what will happen next. And those organizations that submit an application are made aware of what happens next, but specific to some of the questions that we routinely receive in that respect. But if there are things that committee and council would like to see included in the application process, we're certainly amenable to that, but we don't have any specific recommendations to bring forward.
Councillor?
I'll leave my questions there, as I'm interested to hear what my colleagues have to say, and interested in what Councillor Kayabag's motion is. I just don't want us going in circles when something else is coming down at us.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Kayabag.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think that Councillor Blo's questions are great questions.
Sorry, Madam Chair, point of personal privilege. She's just very, very hard to hear. I can't hear my colleague and Councillor Kayabag.
Thank you. Councillor, is there a way you could talk closer to your microphone or something? See if that will help.
I will try to raise my voice a little higher. Let me know if you hear me better now.
A little bit better.
Okay, sounds good. I was saying that I think that Councillor Pelosi's comments are very great questions that she's asking. First of all, I want to thank staff for the pilot project. I have heard great feedback from the community on the spirit behind the proclamation and how it has impacted different people in our community. For those who have been able to use it, but obviously there has been comments around how this could be improved. First of all, the length of period in which people can apply is something that when there are smaller organizations, it gets a little difficult to plan 6 weeks prior to when they can apply for proclamation. I also think that some of the feedback that we've also heard from the community is that when they were expecting or when they were hoping to get a proclamation, they didn't have information on how this was going to play out. So maybe in their minds, they had thought it was going to be proclaimed through the city website or on social media or an official event, or even through the social media of the City of London or the mayor. But I did take in their comments and said that we will be looking to 2-year program, seeing how it's worked out and what improvements we can make. So I'm not sure if staff would be needing council to drive that, or if based on the comments that we're sharing or the comments that they've heard through different applicants, or even the experience that they had through the proclamation of, the pilot project, if they can perhaps either suggest or help us figure out what are the things that we're working that we can keep and what are the things that we can revise. But I did want to allow, my colleagues to make more comments, but I didn't want to put a motion at the end to continue the policy with revised, changes through the policy. And I'm not sure if this is going to come from council. We are not the ones who receive the applications directly, so we may not even have an insight on all the things that that needs to be changed. But based on the comments that I've heard from the community and different applicants, there is still a lack of knowledge, a lack of awareness, and other people who would have applied for the proclamation, they don't know how to. So it's still, maybe there needs to be some awareness around how people can use it through the website, or it can be shared through social media so that it has more visibility and more people can participate. And the 6-week period was also mentioned to be a barrier for a lot of really small organizations that do bring awareness to a larger group of people in the community. Those are my comments. I'll wait for my colleagues. I see that other people want to speak on the motion, on the item, but I did want to entertain a motion to continue the policy with revised changes.
Okay.
If I eventually get a seconder.
Okay, Councillor. So I'll ask the city clerk or Ms. Westlake Powers first about the idea of social media, the city using their social media account or the city website to announce these proclamations when they are in place, the ones that we've passed, and is that feasible, and also why the 6 weeks, why we've put such a long lead time for a deadline to accept applications, acknowledging that very few of the applicants actually did meet that 6-week deadline requirement. So I'll go to you, Ms. Westlake Powers.
Thank you. Through the chair, we have not made any recommendations for changes, as you can see in the report. The feedback that has been previously mentioned, we're not receiving that here in our office. So certainly if there's a recommendation from committee, we'll take that away and bring back a draft revised policy. We would be looking for direction with respect to that. In terms of the 6 weeks, we've not made any recommendation to change that, acknowledging fully that many don't make that timeline. But I would caution against shortening it too much, because then we just have less flexibility to work within. When we get one with 4 weeks, we're, for example, often able to accommodate that, but the less notice that we have, the less ability we have to get it onto a committee agenda. So we're trying to keep within the committee deadline timelines and still be transparent with agendas as they're published. So that would be my comments with respect to that.
Thank you. I will note that one teeny tiny recommendation that staff put in the report, and I call it a teeny tiny recommendation, was that staff were suggesting perhaps that we not have a requirement for staff to do a report, but rather just put the applications themselves on the agenda. So that's something for us to consider today as well. I'll go to you, Deputy Mayor Morgan.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I'll share my thoughts on this as well. So I think that the thing we have debated mostly at the committee has been the need for a London connection with the proclamation policy. That certainly means that there can be a provincial or national organization, but that there's some sort of link to the London population, how they benefit from the organization's work, and those components. So as we contemplate changes to the policy, perhaps one of the items we could contemplate is that there needs to be a London area sponsor for the proclamation. So the organization could be national, but that they can choose either someone from their local office, someone who is locally impacted, someone who could be pretty much anybody. We all have to do that to run for office. We've got to get someone to nominate us. And I think, maybe the way around this is to have a local designated contact at the time of the application, so that as we want to reach out and find out about that London connection, they've identified the individual who can do that, who is in the city. So if we're going to continue with the proclamation policy, which it sounds like there's some interest from the committee from doing so, I think that might be one area where we could add that component, and that would cover off the item that was the most debated item by the committee members, that being a London connection for the events. And I would be comfortable continuing with the proclamation policy with that sort of change attached to it, only because I think it would shrink some of the debate time associated with it.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Morgan. And if we're going to add that, then perhaps we would, so we have to give direction to staff. And I think that part of that direction should be that that's very clear. And I know it was added later, but that it's very clear on the application form. And rather than even saying, what is your London connection, say you must have a local person at least to bring this forward, carry it forward, or what, something like that. Barb has her hand up. Ms. Westlake Power, go ahead.
Thank you for recognizing me again through the chair. I just wanted to circle back to Councillor Kayabaga's question related to promotion of this program. I just wanted to mention that we could certainly reach out to colleagues in the communications department, but the city clerk's office does not have social media accounts. So we don't have that capability, but we could certainly look into that if that's the direction of the committee and council.
Thank you. So that would be something like promotion of these special days, weeks, or months would possibly happen through the communications department. Councillor Kayabaga, I see your hand.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to ask staff on that comment why the current City of London social media platforms will not be a consideration.
I don't think that's what Ms. Westlake Powers said, Councillor Kayabaga. She just said that the clerk's department doesn't have a social media account, and so there's been no specific direction in the past given to staff to promote this through the City of London social media account. And that's something that we could direct staff to do, but Ms. Saunders has something.
Through you, Madam Chair, I just wanted to clarify the City of London's communication on behalf of the corporation is centralized through the communications department. So it wasn't our intent for that to be interpreted that we weren't willing to do that. We were just bringing to the attention that it would have to be through the communications department.
So,
Thank you.
So as we move things along, we have a motion that's being crafted as we speak, which is what committees do. And Councillor Kayabaga has indicated that she would like the motion to say that we continue with the policy with some revisions. One revision that has been suggested is that we ensure that there is a London connection, maybe a London sponsor, if it's a national or provincial organization. Another option is that we direct staff to promote these days either on the city website or through the social media accounts of the City of London, or both via the communications department. And those are the two a la carte things I have on the menu right now. And I will go to Councillor Van Hulst and then Councillor Pelosa.
Sorry, Madam Chair, I wasn't done before you move on.
I'm so sorry. Go ahead, Councillor Kayabaga.
Thank you. So I also appreciate Councillor Morgan's comments. I do agree that this is something that was discussed a lot at committee. I do want to sort of draw back the comments around small organization, because this is something that has come up, right? And people have talked about needing a national support because their organizations in the local community are small, but maybe perhaps the issue that they're trying to bring awareness to the entire community is often something that they're trying to do is that they can bring more people together and support the cause. Or I can't remember specifically what the name of the organization that we dealt with this specifically, and the comments were that they were a smaller organization and didn't have the same sort of support that a national group would have. And maybe this would then have to, I wonder if, Madam Chair, there's any conversations around how do we support smaller organizations that do not have an established organization to be able to go through if we're removing the national application at that point. And if this is just me speculating at this point, I don't know if also the timing of it too, the 6 week has anything to do with a smaller group needing a national organization, or if it's just because in the policy, it has to be a recognized organization. So I wonder if there's like some conversation around really understanding what that means.
Right. So, Councillor, I believe through Deputy Mayor Morgan's comments, it wasn't that anybody's looking to stop a national or provincial organization from coming forward, but just that there should be at least a London person who's bringing it here locally, or putting their name behind it locally. And Deputy Mayor Morgan has his hand up just to clarify.
Yeah, just to clarify, I certainly think national organizations could still apply. What I was suggesting is perhaps there's a component of the application form that says sponsored locally by, and it's an individual in the city. It could be someone who benefits from the program. It could be someone they've spoken to. It could be someone from a local office in a small organization. It could be just someone who supports what the national organization is doing, but one person in the City of London who would be the local sponsor, and thus a local person we could talk to or reach out to as we assess the applications ourselves to find out what the local impacts are of this work in this organization.
I appreciate the clarification. And just my last comment on this, Madam Chair, would be, since we're still working on the language of the motion, I would also like to include a direction in the spirit of proclamation and bringing awareness to the city on different important issues that affect different members of our community. I do wonder if we could entertain having land acknowledgements be made in council chambers, if that could be added into the motion.
Councillor, I don't know if that's necessarily part of this policy, number one. Number two, there was a direction in the last term of council, and I was directly named in that motion from last term of council to work on the land acknowledgement with local First Nations. That has always been a work in progress, and with the new Indigenous Community Liaison Advisor, that was part of what my comments were at the beginning, that I'm hoping the things that are sort of sitting on the back burner and have not moved forward will now move forward more quickly, because there is a need to consult. And even though I have done consultation with First Nations in the area, there is rapid turnover every 2 years of their councils. And so it's difficult, let me just say that. So, and I see the city manager is on screen. Go ahead, Ms. Livingston.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to add that the director of the Anti-Racism, Anti-Oppression Unit joined us on May 31st. And this is one of the items that I have asked her to work on with the Indigenous community liaison advisor. So I just want to assure committee that we recognize this is an important piece of work, and we are already beginning to do that work. So I just wanted to share that information.
Thank you, Ms.
That's
Livingston.
great, Madam Chair. Thank you for the information.
Thank you, Councillor. Okay, Councillor Van Holst.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Perhaps in our online application, we can have the local address be a mandatory thing. That might help it, and also make clear that the purpose of this was to promote our local organizations, not national ones. That if there's a national day that can be proclaimed, then I think there's some redundancy to also proclaim that locally and provincially. Similarly, if it's a provincial proclamation, I think we're fine with just having that, unless there's a local group that wants to do something. I'm also just a little uncomfortable about doing promotions for the groups, because we're somewhat at risk. We have to do a much more thorough job of vetting organizations if we're going to be promoting them to the public. And then the final thing is, I think it's fine. I agree with that staff could just put the application into our agenda, as opposed to every time we have an application and attached to that would be our policy as an appendix. And I don't think we need to see that every time. So those are my comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Pelosa.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have two separate questions, unrelated. My first question is in regards to Part G. An organization may request one proclamation per calendar year. Looking through you to the clerk's office to see if any organizations had expressed interest in doing more than one, but was told that they can't.
Thank you. I'll go to the clerk.
Through you, Madam Chair, I'm not aware of having a duplicate request in the same year.
Thank you. My follow-up comment to that would be just raising concern, as we have proclaimed upon a receipt for Indigenous Peoples Day today, acknowledging organizations like NAMRIND tends to be the group for Indigenous issues that would liaise with the city and potentially do this kind of work, that I guess they'd have to find individuals or start finding other Indigenous organizations if they want to actually acknowledge Orange Shirt Day in September, or have actually got a chance to recognize Indigenous Peoples Month to be proclaimed, as that's the organization who does a lot of work with the city. So just concerned that one proclamation, some organizations who potentially do more lifting would be excluded and have to perhaps pick a day that matters or find alternate staff and start trying to put different names on these. So I'll leave that thought with committee, as I do have that concern, especially if organizations and small organizations are trying to do more work in town. They're left to do more heavy lifting and don't have resources. Second comment is more of a rabbit hole, so please bear with me. On the last page of the report, and it will be a question to the clerk's office, that says, although it's not a formal part of the policy, it's recommended that any future applications be placed on committee agendas as submitted and without a staff report, recognizing that staff currently don't give too much context outside the current policy. If we go with that, just raising concern if we would need to amend the issuance of proclamation policy in regards to item 4.1C, because it does say that the clerk's office will review the policy and make sure that's in accordance. As definitely want to make sure that we don't accidentally go against anything in K for campaigns or events that are contrary to City of London policies or bylaws, recognizing there are a few nuances that I've come into personally that seem like a great idea, and it's in some cities' policy and we just can't support it based on other external factors. So looking for the clerk's advice if we need to amend 4.1C, if we're okay, if that's the direction committee chooses to take.
Okay, I'll go to the clerk.
Madam Chair, I would leave C as is. I still think we need to review the application in the context of other policies. So, but what we wouldn't do is write a report. So, if the proclamation is placed on an agenda, you could assume that there was at least some review undertaken in accordance with policies. With respect to your, if I could go back to your question about Part G, the reason that was placed in, the city clerk's office also processes requests for community flagpole and lighting requests for the building, and we've been doing that for a number of years, and sometimes we do have organizations asking for the same thing to be done twice in 1 year. So we certainly can reword G. You know, it could be the same organization as long as it's a different recognition. So we'll certainly take a look at G and see if perhaps we could reword that, because certainly there's some organizations that would celebrate more than one thing per year. So as long as it's a different thing and not the same thing twice.
Is that good, Councillor Plaza?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to the clerk for recognizing that absolutely a different recognition from a same group I'd be happy to have, but just not same recognitions every month proclaiming the same thing. So thank you.
Great, thank you. Any other comments on this? Mr. Mayor?
Thank you, Chair, and I'm sorry I've come in from another meeting, but and if this issue has been dealt with, then please stop me. And that is the issue of the London linkage to the application. Time and again, since there's no vetting from the clerk's office from the standpoint of the London connection, everything else is except for what's on the application.
So since you told me to stop you, I will stop you.
Yes. Okay, please do. Please.
So that has come up, and so we're sort of working like an a la carte menu for the motion that Councillor Kayabaga is proposing, which is continue the policy with some revisions. And one of the revisions was that we require a London connection. So even if it is a national or provincial organization, that there be at least an individual in London who is a sponsor of the application.
So that's the language you used to sponsor London.
That is something that's been thrown out there, yes. The motion, actually, if you refresh your screen, there is a motion that's being crafted, and the one part says, the application process be refined to require a local contact in London.
Yeah, I think that's too general, Chair, if I may carry on then. I like the idea of the linkage, where that, you know what you don't want to have, you don't want to, I'm tired of hearing, I think we all are, well, we know somebody that has something that is connected to, and by the way, happen to be in London. Well, you know what? There's a lot of wonderful causes out there, but if it's a London, Ontario proclamation by London City Council, it has to have stronger than a by the way kind of linkage. So when you were talking about sponsor along that line, even though it's a broader organization, but with a London sponsor, I'm there. But the way you've just described it feels weaker than what you said. Okay. Can we make it stronger? And I'd be the happiest guy.
Do you have a suggestion on making it stronger? And if you don't, or if you're still thinking about it, the deputy mayor also has put his hand up.
Well, I think that the deputy mayor and I might have similar thoughts. I'll let him go ahead.
Go ahead. Deputy Mayor Morgan.
Yes, I do have similar thoughts, and I did raise this, and my intent in raising it was much like next year when everybody has to run for office, we have to get a bunch of people to nominate us. And I think, you know, for one local person to nominate an organization, be them local or national, for a proclamation seems appropriate to me and covers off the London connection. And so I don't know if the language can be sponsor or nominator, but that was the intent that I was going for. And this is not restricted to specific types of individuals. This is anybody in the city who, whether they're a client or someone who benefits or someone who believes in this organization, who would like to see their city council issue a proclamation. That's my intent, and I would definitely support stronger language if the committee supports it.
And I will go to Councillor Van Holst.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would support stronger language because I think that connection is important. There's, for instance, I could start up an organization and call it a national organization and then write city councils around the country and say, well, if I can find one person I know that would sponsor that, there would be a proclamation there. And then I could say, well, my organization has had proclamations from X number of cities. And I think sometimes this kind of thing is done where there's groups just looking to get as many proclamations from as many cities as possible without having done the work of actually establishing roots in that city. And I think what we want to see and who we want to help are those groups that have been established in the city. And so if you're a group and you've done the work to create an organization and it's here and you've got supporters, more than one, then I consider that a London organization, not just someone who's a token satellite of something else. So I would like to see it. Your organization has a mailing address here in London and operates somehow. I'm not sure how we can do that, but that's to me better than just needing one person who says, oh, I think we should proclaim this here because it's being done at some other level.
Okay, Councillor. Ms. Westlake Power has her hand up, so go ahead.
Thank you. Through the chair, I just wanted to point out that certainly we're listening to what the committee members are saying, and we would be bringing back a draft for review. So I don't think it's necessary to work out all of the finite details at this point in time. We're happy to bring something back for your consideration that hopefully we can find a balance with.
Councillor Van Holst.
Okay, thank you. And I'm just looking at the motion, but I want to tell you, Madam Chair, that I'm more comfortable with this being a continuing the pilot until we're very happy with it, as opposed to establishing a policy where we're still tweaking it.
Well, that's not the motion that's on the floor. The motion is, or the motion that's being proposed is that we continue with it.
With the pilot?
No, continue the policy. What was it? Continue the pilot finished and continue with the policy with revisions.
Okay, well, I'll wait to see the revisions, but I may vote against that and then vote for, or even move a continued pilot with the revisions.
So Councillor Van Holst, I wonder if you could take the chair. I wouldn't mind making a few comments.
Happy to do so, Madam Chair. Go to you.
Thank you. So I do note that the clerks are working on revising that language in part A1, from local contact to some different language. I'm not as concerned about the instigation of a proclamation coming from a national or provincial organization. Very often, There are local activists here in town or local chapters that are involved in this, but as Councillor Kayabaga mentioned, the vast resources tend to be with the larger organization, and I certainly don't have a problem with a national organization going across the country and asking for proclamations at the local level. We are the most, our level of government is the most direct contact with constituents compared to the other levels of government. I think proclamations at the local level carry a lot of weight. And I will, one of the most recent proclamations we made was Childhood Cancer Awareness Month. And I want to use that as an example because I know local people involved in ChildCan in London, and they are connected to the national organization. So it was the national organization that completed the application, but I did reach out to the local people, and they were aware of the application. They were involved in their local way, but it was all of the resources and the clout and the organization and all of those things are very well embedded at the national level. The reason I bring up Childhood Cancer Awareness Month is because of the work that we do locally in not just childhood cancer, but cancer in general in the London Regional Cancer Program and in the Thames Valley Children's Hospital here in London as well. And with our local Ronald McDonald House, I know people who have taken the opportunity to use the resources at the local Ronald McDonald House. So as childhood cancer as one example, being the regional center that we are in Southwestern Ontario, there are children from across Southwestern Ontario that come to London and are very well served here locally. It's something that we should be proud of. That's just one example for me that sticks in my brain because cancer has touched my life in many, many ways, just like many people. Everybody knows many people who have suffered from cancer, and I have known many children as well. So that's an example of a national organization behind the rollout across the country, if you will. So I'm happy to second the motion that Councillor Kayabaga has put on the floor, which is consider the pilot over, continue the policy with some revisions, and the clerks are working on those revisions, which are the application process refinements to require a specific local sponsor or nominator in London. Can we refresh our screen? Will that be up? So they're still working on that language. 2 would be an expanded promotion of the proclamations through corporate social media, and 3 would be revisions that would permit multiple distinct proclamations from the same organization. I would add a part 4, if the mover is okay with this add as well, that we don't require the clerk's office to do a report for every single application that comes to us. So with that, those are my comments. I'm happy to take the chair back, Mr. Vice Chair, if you're happy to hand it back over.
Back to you, the chair, Madam.
Thanks, Councillor. Are there any other comments or questions or additions that people would like to propose to the motion?
Madam Chair?
Yes, Councillor.
As the mover, I agree with your addition.
Thanks, Councillor. And the City Clerk has her hand up.
Through you, Madam Chair, while Ms. Westlake-Power's working on that, I just wanted to also raise for your awareness that every year staff throughout all of the service areas undertake a review of council policies. So it's not stagnant. Every policy gets reviewed every year and we report out. And in fact, I'm working on a report for July with that. So even with this draft coming forward, it will be reviewed every year.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. So ongoing reviews every year of all of our council policies, and also noting that we are asking staff to come back with a draft revised policy. So We are proposing revisions, and staff will bring us back a draft first, so this is not anything that will be set in stone. Any other debate on this? Not seeing any, so we'll wait for the final wording to come up.
It should be available to the committee now.
So if you refresh your screens, you should see the motion on the floor. And I'll read it, that the following actions be taken with respect to the report dated June 21st, 2021, entitled Issuance of Proclamations Policy - Pilot Program Review. A, the above noted pilot be considered complete. B, the city clerk be directed to bring forward proposed amendments to the issuance of proclamation policy to a future meeting of the Corporate Services Committee for consideration. That would include 1, the application process refinements to require a specific local contact in London, but I think we were going to change that word to sponsor or nominator. It gives us enough. Okay. 2, an expanded promotion of the proclamations through corporate social media. And 3, revisions that would permit multiple distinct proclamations from the same organization. And finally, C, the above noted report be received. So the city clerk has indicated that that word contact is just in the motion, but they understand the intent from committee, and they want that we want a stronger the idea of a nominator there. So staff are fine with this wording because they understand the intent of committee on that part of it. As long as committee's okay with letting city staff come back with their draft policy. So that's been moved and seconded, and I'm not seeing any more hands in the air, so I'm going to call the question on that.
Closing the vote, and the motion is passed 6-0.
Wonderful. Thank you, everybody. That was a great debate. The next item is 2.2, the Respectful Workplace Policy and Workplace Violence Prevention Procedure Annual Report. Nobody actually pulled this, but since the other ones were pulled, we're dealing with it separately. I wonder if there are any comments or questions, or if anyone would like to make a motion. Councillor Van Holst.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to say I was pleased that most of the complaints were dealt with informally. So I think that's a good sign. And I'm happy to put the recommendation on the floor.
Thank you. So the councillor is moving the staff recommendation. Are there any other comments or questions, or a seconder? Councillor Deputy Mayor Morgan, you're nodding your head. Does that mean you're seconding? Yes? Awesome. Thank you. Any other comments? Seeing none, I'm going to call the question.
Closing the vote, the motion's passed 5-0.
Thank you. And I just want to note as well that the mayor did have to leave us, and he indicated that to me earlier today, that he had to leave early. That takes us to 2.3, expropriation of lands, the Dingman Drive Improvements Project. And I'm sorry, I can't remember who asked to pull that. Councillor Van Holst, go ahead.
Madam Chair, thank you very much. And as I'm looking at parcels 1 and 2 for potential expropriations on page 42 of our agenda, the paper agenda, I had a look at those and noticed that there along those areas are mature trees, and so I could see why someone would hesitate to give those up. And my question to staff was, would those trees be impacted by the road improvement? I'm not sure exactly how far that goes back. And I'm wondering if that's the case, if there's other things we can do to help re-tree a line like that.
I'll go to Mr. Warner.
Madam Chair, I believe that one would be me, actually.
Thank you, Ms. Chair. Go ahead.
No problem. So we're not at a point in the detailed design where we have the exact number of tree impacts determined. Certainly, it would be our desire to maintain mature landscaping where possible, and if not, we tend to plant at a ratio of at least 3 to 1 to replace those trees. We are aware of the presence of the trees at that location and do hope where we can retain them, we will, but we don't have that answer quite yet.
Councillor?
Okay, thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay, do I have can I have a motion on that one? Councillor Pelosi, you're moving the staff recommendation, and do I have a seconder? Seconded by the Deputy Mayor. Thank you. I'm not seeing any other hands going up, so I'm going to call the question.
Closing the vote,
This to items for direction in 4.1 is an application for the issuance of a proclamation for World Patient Safety Day. Do I have a mover for that? Councillor Kayabaga, I see your hand up for moving that. Do you have a comment as well?
No, Madam Chair, I was just moving it.
Thank you. Do I have a second? Seconded by the Deputy Mayor. Thank you. If there are no questions or comments, I will call the question.
closing the vote, the motion's passed 5-0.
Thank you. And for the next one, I wonder if I could ask the Vice Chair to take the chair again, because that's coming from me.
Thank you. And from the chair, I go to you, Councillor Cassidy.
Thank you, Mr. Presiding Officer. So this is a standard letter that comes before this committee when someone is seeking a role with FCM. The deadline for this is actually, I believe, today, but our government relations people, Adam Thompson, had reached out to FCM because this letter, as you see, wasn't even on the added agenda. So I knew that the deadline was coming up, but we weren't aware yet in London when it was. So FCM has indicated that they will follow our timeline and the requirement to go through our committee and then through council, and they will we've already got the application in, and they will wait for the endorsement that has to come from our city council. So I would put this motion on the floor that Councillor Cassidy be endorsed to serve on FCM standing committees for the 2021 and 2022 term. And as is normal for this motion, that the expenses be covered through the City of London annual expense allocation. And that is my motion.
Thank you. And I'll look to Deputy Mayor Josh Morgan.
Yes, and I was going to let Councillor Cassie know I'd be happy to move it if she didn't want to move the thing about herself, but she's good to do it anyways. I'll second it then. And I will say, I have expressed, again, my concern to FCM about the short timelines that they're giving this, and can confirm what Councillor Cassidy has said is that certainly they will give us every opportunity to nominate someone, and I'm happy to do that. In the past, we've nominated 2 people for committees. I wouldn't do much more than that because there's only so many spots. But as a current board member, I'm happy to have colleagues who want to serve on committees. It certainly helps during the events, as Councillor Kaibaga can attest to. It's great to have a couple of people to divide up the committee work so that we can get our message out to all the different committees. So I think this is great. I think the way that it's funded is appropriate, and I'm very supportive of Councillor Cassidy's request and having a colleague on FCM if she gets picked, which we'll try to help with.
Okay, well, we certainly wish her the best. Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I'll go now to Councillor Kaibaga.
Thank you, Presiding Chair. I put my hand up to second the motion, but it doesn't need a seconder anymore. I am happy to see Councillor Cassidy put her interest forward, and I think that she's going to do great work. Last year, I was able to be on the standing committees. Not going to be able to do this now, as I'm also participating in federal political journey, so it doesn't work while you're doing that. So I'm happy to see that someone else from the City of London can continue to do the great work that Councillor Morgan and others have done. So thanks.
And thank you. So are there any further comments or questions about this item or the FCM timelines? Okay, then at that, I'll call the question.
Closing the vote, the motion's passed 5-0.
And I return the chair to you, Councillor Cassidy.
Thank you, Councillor Van Holst. So that is it for our public agenda. And there are no deferred matters or additional business, or I will check committee to see if you have any additional business. And I see none. So I will look for a motion to go in camera. We have 7 items, and then there is an 8th added item, which you may have received. You should have received that report. Councillor Pelosa?
I'm moving to go in camera.
Thank you, Councillor. Is there a second? Councillor Van Holst? Okay, and for people watching, the agenda has the reasons why we are going in camera, and you can see that on the public agenda. And I will call the vote on that to go in camera.
Motion's passed 5-0.